Crowdfunding. It's the new way of raising money for anything from businesses and startups to sports teams and libraries. But is it just a stopgap solution, using private money to solve public problems? And when communities have to crowdfund to cover government funding cuts, are we effectively paying another tax? This is Roundtable with me, Shuli Ghosh. Crowdfunding is a rapidly growing form of finance, a way of raising donations, loans and investment. It's been a huge success for businesses and creative projects. Now, many cash-strapped councils are wondering if crowdfunding could be the answer to their problems too.
It's fundraising, cast out to the masses online. The idea that if everyone chips in a little bit, great things can be achieved. But recently, crowdfunding has also moved into financing basic services and facilities for communities traditionally seen as a responsibility of governments or councils. Is the platform becoming a solution for a gap in public spending? Entrepreneurs have used crowdfunding to launch business ventures. Others have used it to raise much-needed cash following personal tragedy or illness. But now, communities taking charge over government shortfalls is gaining momentum worldwide. In America, crowdfunding has been used to provide school lunches for students who can't afford them. In London, it's helped raise funds for facilities like the refurbishment of public spaces. Malaysians are even contributing to a fund to help the country out of $250 billion worth of debt. While some say it's society working at its best, others say it highlights major failings by governments and councils. Why are some communities feeling the need to turn to each other to fix public problems? And why aren't regular taxes covering all the basics? Crowdfunding is based on the idea of shared community. Contributors want to be part of something, whether it's straightforward philanthropy or a stake in an emerging business. But the idea of a digital democracy, based on the popularity of causes, also poses problems. In an age of social media and an increasing battle for attention, emphasis has now turned to how to stand out from the crowd. There's a saturation of worthy causes online and an increasing risk of donor fatigue. Most crowdfunding sites charge fees, and donations are usually not tax deductible, unlike contributions made to officially recognised charities. Fundraising in the digital age has enabled people to contact potential donors far and wide. But is this new sense of self-funded community affecting the way traditional taxes work? And are governments also now relying on society to prop up public shortfalls?
So here with me in the studio is Christopher Norris, the head of crowdfunding at CrowdPatch. Ruth Allsop is from Brighton and Hove City Council. It used crowdfunding to raise more than £460,000 to save its seafront terraces. Ayisha Hameed is a campaign coach at LaunchGood, and Amy Butterworth manages the crowdfunding programme at the Royal Society for Arts. Good to have you all with me here in the studio. So Ayisha, let me start with you. Very active crowdfunding site that you've got. It's been very busy recently. Why do you think crowdfunding sites have increased in number so much?
I think it's got a lot to do with just the changing landscape and just the political climate that we're living in, whether from the US to the UK. And crowdfunding is filling that gap where, say, for instance, governments aren't where governments are failing, basically. But I think it also looks at just how everything is online these days and just the way digital media informs us in our everyday. You're seeing crowdfunding as an alternative platform to kind of reach larger audiences, and it's like a new way of giving to causes that you care about.
Yeah, it's very much a platform of our time, isn't it? I mean, my parents would never use anything like this, but in this sort of computer-savvy age, it is becoming more a way of being able to both advertise campaigns that you want to raise money for and also go online and give money to. Would you agree with that?
Yes, but it's not a new thing. I mean, we've got the RSA here. I mean, one of the first crowdfunding campaigns in the UK was actually run in the early 1850s to raise public contributions for the Great Exhibition in 1851.
So the idea
is not new,
but the way we're doing it is...
What is new is that the technology allows online for all of these things to happen in a very simple way. And because it's easy to collect money, to market things, and to build networks, which is the essence of crowdfunding, then essentially you then get lots of platforms which are filling that space because it becomes something that the internet can do.
And you can be as specific as you like. I notice on your fund, CrowdPatch,
Yep.
which calls itself a platform for social entrepreneurs. You've got a project on now, as I understand it, to raise money for UK libraries to buy books by Icelandic authors.
Yep.
I mean, that is a very narrow remit. So
well, that's one that I ran. That's one that I ran actually, because I have a separate business which is called Jóla Bókaflóð, which is an Icelandic tradition which hopefully people will become more aware of this year, where they essentially encourage people to buy books as Christmas presents. And it turns out that all the way around the world, every culture in some form celebrates Christmas in some way as a kind of opportunity to share presents. And so I was running a campaign when I first set the company up to do something that promoted Icelandic literature, and it seemed to me that there was an opportunity to raise some money, which I did successfully, to promote some Icelandic authors.
I think that's fascinating. And Ruth, your crowdfunding project helped gather over $500,000 to restore some of this Victorian architecture on Brighton seafront. Did you find, well, clearly people were very keen to support that, given the amount of money that you raised?
I think it was a difficult ask, asking people to put money towards the restoration of a structure, but it soon became clear that there was an appetite for that. And
do you think people accepted that you as a council were going to them, the people, to fund something which perhaps some people might think the council should be digging into its own pockets for?
Absolutely. I mean, it is a hard ask and it's a difficult message to put across, but it was something that enabled people to show or not, to give them a choice and to become involved. So it's really, councils have gone for funding for this sort of thing to outside organisations forever. It's not something that the council would have necessarily ever had all of the money to provide the restoration. But I think crowdfunding is, with it being a digital platform, it is a natural progression that more and more people are using, and it kind of gives power to the people, so it gives a voice to the people. So for the council...
Does it give a voice to the people, or is it asking people to do more? Amy, one of your projects was installing playgrounds in some cash-strapped boroughs, including London boroughs. A lot of people would say, isn't that the council's job?
It became the council's job once they realised how much people needed it. And one of the exciting things, a bit like your campaign, about these kinds of people power from the ground sort of projects, is that the larger the community grows of them being involved, the more the council starts listening. 3 out of the 4 projects that we put onto Space Hive in the last 2 years have reached the councils that are to do with them, and then they've given a lot of donations as a result, because they've seen how important it is to the community. So I think they respond to the people's need, I think, which is a new way of reacting.
Isn't the danger, though, that if we use something like crowdfunding to cover these gaps where we see a need, and there clearly is a need because people are responding, that doesn't encourage the authorities to step in, and because they think, oh well, we need to save some money, we won't fund this library or this playground because we can get the money through crowdfunding. What do you guys say to that?
I think it's a useful step. It's a useful first step, and it shows councils, it shows larger organisations that there's a real will or a real need for a project. So it's a useful first step. I don't think that it's a long-term solution, and it's not the whole solution. It demonstrates that there's a will. So for us in Brighton and Hove, the restoration of the whole terrace is going to cost £24 million. So the money we raised, which was 460,000, is a drop in the ocean, but that really gives us a very strong public mandate and a much greater lever in accessing bigger.
So you're
pots of
showing through
money.
your campaign that there is a public appetite for that, which
Absolutely.
gives you ammunition when you go back to the
It is
the
really,
council.
yes, it is a very strong message, not just for the council but for other funding bodies across the UK, that that this sort of project needs that money, but there's such competition for those funds. We need to really show that people are behind it and there is a real public appetite or need for it.
What do you think, Chris? Because clearly crowdfunding is a very useful tool for raising money for startups, for investments, loans, people getting their ideas off the ground. How far do we go with it, though?
Well, you don't need to run projects which raise lots of money. I mean, essentially what you're doing when you run a crowdfunding campaign is proving to people generally that you are somebody that can run a campaign, that you're good at managing people, that you can handle money, that you can run a marketing campaign, that you can get people excited about something, and that you can meet deadlines. And so if then people can see that, and what tends to happen when you run a campaign is that it generates a lot of excitement. And people offer you things, they offer you in-kind goods and services. We ran a campaign through the RSA actually where some people were trying to raise some money for a new facility in their building, which was running spaces for business women who had young children who were at preschool to build a better cafe. And essentially,
So, projects like that, I understand.
Yeah,
but
what happened was that the council then got to hear about it and then invited that project to then apply for a £48,000 grant.
But when it comes to things like, well, for example, in America, there is crowdfunding is being used to pay for a whole host of services like free school meals, basic equipment for classrooms, healthcare. I'm not sure it's getting to that stage in this country, but can we see it going that way? And how much of a concern is that? Because our taxes supposed to be paying for this.
But then charities exist to fill in the gaps that the governments can't deliver. And one of the questions that the CEO of the RSA is asking Matthew Taylor is, shouldn't charities attempt to no longer need to exist? And if we did our jobs enough, then we wouldn't have to do this anymore. It would just be done on society's behalf. What's exciting about this now is that we're democratising ideas by it coming from the people. We're showing them that people power matters, that the communities are capable of doing these things. And it means that the councils have to start listening. Not only do they start approving by giving the money themselves, but then they're starting to bring up the ideas a little further. So hopefully that kind of change starts happening in that sense.
Do you think more charities are using crowdfunding? Because apparently they're not using them as much as other sections of the community, and charities have been, from my reading of it, slower to get on the bandwagon, as it were. Does that surprise you?
Not really. One of the things that we found a lot with crowdfunding campaigns is that it's a great cash injection. It's not a long-term solution. And one of the things that just the fact that these are community-run projects shows that there is a desperation to fill that gap, and there is a need for people to take charge where they feel that things aren't happening. So, I think once that is starting to be understood, then things can start to change.
You'll have to explain to me a little bit how a campaign works. Is it online, you're able to donate to it for a finite period of time? Is it only up for, how long would a crowdfunding campaign for a particular project run?
There are different models depending on the project, depending on the topic. For us, we chose a model that said we had to raise 432 was our initial target, but we had to do it within 4 months. So we had a deadline of the 30th of November 2017. And if we didn't receive that money, if we didn't have that many pledges, then none of the money would become realised, so we wouldn't take any of those
that's
pledges.
Interesting. You had a real incentive.
It was a real incentive. There was a real deadline. There was a real push. There was a real sense of urgency and tension, if you like, as you watch day by day the pledges coming in, and sometimes it was to trickle, and then there'd be a bit more, and it'd go up. So it was real. There was a real sense of urgency about it, and we had to reach that target, otherwise everything would not happen.
So you've really got to get your message across. I mean, you were talking about marketing. You're a campaign coach. What makes a good campaign? How do you help people sell the idea.
100%. So, and I think this is the conversation that we were having. In the major components of a successful campaign include the power of the crowd, because without a crowd, how are you going to be able to drive the funds in to your campaign and whatever cause that you're kind of talking about. And then the second idea is the storytelling aspect. You need to be able to pitch your story, like who are you, who's your team, why does your campaign matter, what is the story about, and what is the impact on the community. And then once you do that, it's inspiration is the last component, which is you are inspiring others within your community, your network, to donate to the cause that you care about.
So if I'm being cynical, I would say that if you choose really emotive language, or if you're really good at promoting something, you're going to have a better chance of getting money in. I mean, is that how fundraising should work?
I think there's loads of aspects to that, and it really depends. Like without, you can have an emotive story, you can be, you know, telling everyone this is why your campaign matters, but if you don't have anyone to support that, then you're not going to get the funds in. Does that make sense? So it's, I think those three things kind of play together in order to facilitate that process. And what we find is that we have many people who come to our platform and they say, you know, I've created this campaign, I just put it on Facebook, but no funds have come in. Like our service is there to kind of provide you like crowdfunding best practices. We'll help you with, you know, writing your pitch, or we'll help you with, you know, reaching out to your crowd, but you have to drive that. Does that make sense? Like we are the platform, but we facilitate that process, but you have to take the charge and lead your kind of community in giving.
Right.
I think marketing is absolutely key. It's a massive part of it. You have to get the message across, and you have to enable people to tell the story, especially for the council. People weren't going to be so interested if it's coming from a council spokesperson. So you really have to find out what this means to people and get those people to tell the story, because they will be passionate about it, and you can't buy that passion, but you need to harness it, and you need to let people come forward and tell the story and what it means to them.
Did you get any negative feedback about?
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. And this is what makes digital media so interesting these days. You know, it can make or break things. It's such a powerful, massive tool. But yes, of course, we got criticism. We got asked, well, why is the council doing this? Why are you asking for money? It should be your job anyway. There was a lot of scepticism. It was a difficult message to get across. But we did find those people that were willing to support and wanted to help. And I guess it's like it's a snowball effect. So as soon as people can see that other people are on board and are with you, then it just grows and grows. Businesses want to then come forward and do their bit and be seen to be involved. And it's the old analogy of an empty restaurant, really, isn't it? Nobody wants to go in an empty restaurant.
But as soon as everybody piles in.
As soon as you can see that, yes, this does make sense, we have got these people on board, it becomes credible, it becomes authentic. So definitely the marketing aspect and the messaging is absolutely crucial.
And that's what you were saying about identifying a gap that needs to be filled, and this is a way of doing it.
And one that continues the story afterwards.
Yes.
One of the things that we find crucial in terms of what kind of projects we support, and those that survive the longest are those who have a sustainability plan. So it isn't just, and I think it's one of the reasons why charities might not be jumping on the crowdfunding bandwagon just yet, because we have to prove what we're doing with this money and how we don't keep asking for it. So if there is a plan afterwards.
And that circles back to this idea of, you know, are we paying twice for services that should be provided by the government, by local authorities? Malaysia, for example, as we saw in that report, has set up crowdfunding to pay off its national debt. Now, I don't know whether Theresa May is interested in that as an idea, but what is too far?
But the thing is, if you're a politician and you suggest that as a policy, then in a democracy you can vote those people out. So, you know.
But isn't it happening a little bit to a certain extent that public services are being paid by crowdfunding? I mean, we've already started down that road.
It's not that surprising. I mean, you know, in the mid-90s we started a national lottery in the UK, so you could argue that that's a tax. You know, but
So
people enjoy spending their
What's
couple of pounds.
unacceptable, though? I mean, crowdfunding for an NHS bed, crowdfunding for school meals. I mean, how far is too far?
I'd quite like to see means-tested crowdfunding. So if there is something that the most vulnerable people in this country are missing out on because of not enough tax, for example, having a crowdfunding campaign targeted at those who can afford it and those who don't have to deal with these gaps in services can redress the balance.
So aiming campaigns at those who have more income so that they can pay.
Yeah.
But then how do you get over this, this problem that we've all identified of giving fatigue, being asked to give over and over again?
I think if you look at it in the round, asking for money for a crowdfunding campaign has to be balanced against the level of taxation. So if people are unhappy about being asked about contributing to crowdfunding, but that money is needed, perhaps for projects that wouldn't normally get funded through a crowdfunding campaign, but essentially there are lots of things which are Cinderella projects which are really important and very key, like say social care, which wouldn't, because it's something which is an ongoing thing, and it's difficult to build a narrative around something which is like a big thing with a climax, because there is, one of the things about crowdfunding is it has to be a story.
There are some great innovations in entrepreneurial ideas as well. One of the projects that we supported on Kickstarter is called OneSkin, where you purchase ecological sanitation products, 100% of the profits of which go to support girls' education where they have a barrier in particular parts of the world. So you're crowdfunding to make the products that you can then use, and the more you use them, it funds something else.
And it's not always just about giving money, is it? I mean, loans and investments, you can get a return on that.
I mean, there are lots of different sorts of crowdfunding. We've not talked at all about equity crowdfunding, which essentially is buying a share in a business or buying a share in an idea and hoping that there'll be a return on that.
The value goes up. Presumably the risks are just as the same as buying traditional shares. Is this a new way of raising money? All of you are obviously very positive about the impact of crowdfunding. Do you see this increasing in the future?
Mm-hmm. Well, it is, empirically. I mean, in the last couple of years, the last date where there are statistics is the end of 2016, and the UK value of alternative finance, which includes 97% of that is crowdfunding, was 4.6 billion. To the UK economy, and the previous year it was 3.2, so it went up 43% in 1 year.
How do we vet what goes online? I mean, can I set up a page and say crowdfund for my lifestyle?
You could, but nobody would fund you.
Nobody funds it now. But you see this as very much as we go into the future that you're going to see more people more active on sites like yours, for example.
Exactly, and even with us, we've got a extreme vetting process that we've got our senior team who vet campaigns. So we've got campaigns in 114 countries. Like it could be anything from investing in education to creating safe spaces for young people. It can be literally anything, but we have like a process to make sure that the funds are going to the people that they're saying, this is where it's going to. And I think there is a need for it, like with just the way local authorities or national authorities aren't being able to kind of bridge that gap. Crowdfunding is bridging that gap and providing services. And I think
But do you think the gap will get bigger if crowdfunding steps in? I mean, isn't that the problem?
Potentially, but one of the things I think is interesting about it is that it's communicating where the gaps are. And it's relatively new in terms of an online boom, and I think once these things become more frequent and the government and the local council start listening, I think they'll be able to spot exactly what's going on.
And the other thing to say is that crowdfunding essentially is just another way of raising money. So it's just a mechanism.
But you've got to be computer savvy to set up campaigns, and computer savvy to make donations. So
I would argue
it's a way of making money for a certain generation, isn't it?
Well, yes, but I would suggest that if you want to set up a successful business and you go to your bank manager and say, here's my business plan, then they will also ask you how you're going to market your business. So it's no different from any other way of raising money. If you want to get a loan, you've got to persuade somebody to give you the money. They're not going to give you any money if they think you're going to, not make a success of it, because they're not going to get their money back. So it's just part of it's just another tool that people can use to raise money. That's.
Does that mean then that the only initiatives which are going to bring in enough money, and you were talking about the time limits that are set on some of these campaigns, are the ones which are adequately marketed, which capture public imagination? Is that a problem?
I think it's a natural market forces at work model, because people are either interested or they're not. You can run a very efficient marketing campaign and that will get results. But at the end of the day, if you haven't got something, if you're not offering something that people are interested in or engaged with, it's not going to work. So there'll be natural wastage. So although there'll probably be a lot more campaigns coming up, then just naturally, not all of them will be successful.
I would just say it's a bit like the internet in about 1995, in that you could put a website up on the internet in the mid-90s and expect people to find you, and somehow they'd find that interesting. And then you have like search engines and whatever. If you just did that now, without telling people where the website was, nobody would ever find you.
And I suppose we've all got a lot more social media savvy, and your analogy of the website, it was actually quite difficult to do that.
Yeah, exactly.
But now
It's really easy.
Everybody can do websites. Oh. Thank you so much for joining me. I do appreciate your time, and good luck with all the crowdfunding projects that you're engaged with.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you at home for watching this edition of Roundtable. I'll see you next time. Bye for now.